Hello and welcome to another Scots Way podcast. And today I'm joined by writer Catriona Child, who was last on this podcast in 2012. We both can't believe it. Catriona, it's great to have you back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on it. It's really nice to be asked back as well.
And we're going to talk about your new novel, Fade Into You, which I've got here in the video version. How do you describe it to people? What's your kind of pitch when people ask you to
My kind of jokey pitch is Little Women meets Dawson's Creek, but with a Scottish setting. But I guess it's just a novel about kind of childhood friendships and how they change as you grow up, and first loves and how they change as well. It's kind of just a novel about growing up in Scotland, I suppose, and just the nature of that difficult transition from kind of childhood into early adulthood and how you deal with it, or do you deal with it, I suppose.
Yeah, you do. When you were on previously, it was your debut novel, Trackman. And could you see this almost as an accompanying novel? Because music's at the heart of both.
Yeah, definitely. Music's definitely really important in both of those novels, I think. So I think, yeah, these two are kind of more about kind of, yeah, Scottish, growing up in Scotland and that kind of thing as well. And I suppose they're both they're not autobiographical, but they are based on kind of things that have happened to me. So Trackman, the main character, worked in Virgin Megastore in Edinburgh, and that's where I worked. And then this one's kind of like growing up in the 90s, and that's like my kind of background. My growing up was in the 90s and the 2000s, and going to tea in the park and things like that. So yeah, I think they are a nice kind of accompaniment together. Yeah.
I was going to ask if there was any other reasons apart from the music that you set it in the 1990s so explicitly, but I guess it's because it's the time you say it was all happening to you.
Yeah, well, I kind of came on the back of, do you remember that article in lockdown about Scotland not having a Sally Rooney or something like that, and it set Twitter aflame for a wee
Yes.
while? And I just started thinking, oh, gosh, if I was right, because Sally Rooney's characters are always kind of that sort of age, I feel, and I was thinking if I was going to write a novel kind of about that age, how would I set it? And it would have to be the 90s, because that's when I was that sort of age and navigating teenagers into early adulthood. So that kind of set it off almost, that article. I just started thinking about if I was going to write a novel, and it would have to have a kind of Scottish backdrop, obviously. And so, yeah, it came from that.
You really capture the strength of feeling that accompanies the kind of teenage years in particular, I feel. Things like various obsessions, crushes, even haircuts have such importance in case it goes wrong. And I remember it quite stressful time of Valentine's Day at school. It felt like it could make or break you, but that's the heightened feelings of that time, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of that is just taken from things that I did or things that happened to me. So I sent a Kurt Cobain Valentine card to somebody when I was like 15 or 16 because they were really into Nirvana, and I thought it was, yeah, really romantic and cool to do that. And then, yeah, just that. I think maybe one of the strengths that I have maybe is I'm quite good at kind of empathizing and going back into my head and remembering what it was kind of like to be. I mean, I don't remember everything, but I think, yeah, it's just trying to get back into my headset of what I felt like, and everything is so much more intense when you're a teenager. All the music you listen to, and I can remember sitting with my tapes and like studying the lyrics, and everything is just so much more kind of, and the friendships are much more intense. I think all these things that happen to you as a teenager, they stay with you, and then when you get to my age now that I'm kind of in my 40s, I don't know if it helped having that distance, just being able to look back on it, and then you kind of look back on it, I suppose, with that kind of nostalgic rose tinted kind of look as well. I mean, I don't think a lot of it was as nice as I remember it in my head sometimes, but yeah, it's just trying to get back into that mindset.
I think intense is the right word. You don't realize it at the time, but things could happen in one day that would mark you for the rest of your school life, and even going forward. I can think of at least one person who a friend of mine hadn't seen them since school, and they were then in their early 40s and called them the nickname from school. And they were like, no, that's please don't do that. So it is, and you going back to the Valentine's Day thing, something I'd completely forgotten about, but it brought back memories of, either giving one to someone and getting nothing back, or and sometimes they were huge. I remember getting a huge Valentine's Day card arriving at my home that was just ridiculous, and also things like wearing each other's t-shirts, that kind of thing. It had this kind of oh, no one else does this. And of course, everyone else does it. And that's what's great about the book. Although they're very specific incidents and things, I think everyone will be able to tap into their own memories, something they may not have done for some time, and go, oh yeah, that feeling, I had that feeling, yeah.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope that it will resonate with people and they'll be able to remember things that they did as well. I know. I think I kind of think about being a teenager now and with social media and things like that, and just I don't know. I feel we had it a lot easier, even though it was without having to look at people on Facebook and Twitter. And I think because you are, like you said, it's obsession when you're a teenager. Everything's so intense, and I feel like if you had that ability to be able to see someone's every movement, it could become like quite like stalking somebody on Facebook or on Twitter or
Oh
Instagram.
yeah.
And like I think I would be the person that I fancied or whatever. You'd be on there all the time just watching them, and then it would have the ability to make your mood go up and down, wouldn't it? So
It's really disturbing to think that that would be the case. Oh, and the idea of, you know, say you get a bad haircut, you go in one day, people will be going, oh, haircut, or whatever they might say. That could go on, that would go viral, you know, with something, and everyone would be able to see it. It's a terrifying thought. And because when I was reading the book, and I think other readers will get this, you do start to think about the good and the bad. I mean, maybe, you know, we fence off, you think, oh, that was, you know, I scored a goal in a cup final, or you know, whatever it was. You think, yeah, these were happy times. But actually, what your book does was says, no, it wasn't all, you know, roses and happy memories.
yeah, I'm glad it does that as well. I think I feel like when you were at that age, everything was like you were either really, really high and happy or really, really low in the pits of depression almost. And again, that's where music kind of came into it as well. Like I used music a lot just to like filter my emotions. You know, sometimes you'd be quite happy to just sit there and listen to the same song on repeat and you just felt terrible, but you just almost like wallow in that kind of misery. And then using music when you're happy, just going out. And the thing about the mixtapes in the book as well, like I made so many mixtapes at that age and gave them to friends or kept them myself, and it was all for different moods, you know, like going out with my friends mood, just in the house thinking of the person you fancy kind of mixtape. So yeah.
It's interesting because often a song will come on the radio from when I was in my teenage years and stuff, and I still know every single lyric to it. And I often think, how's that? I couldn't remember, you know, the shopping list. I have to write it down. And I think it maybe is. It's so intense at that time that, you know, it really sticks with you, a lot of these songs, because they're not just songs on the radio, they're often something else.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like I said, I think in those days you were, well, I didn't have like loads of albums because I didn't have a lot of money when you're that age as well. So I had like these like maybe set of maybe 10 really special albums that was all you could kind of afford, and you would just listen to them like on repeat. And as I said, study the lyrics. And like nowadays, you get albums that you like that are new and then come out, but I don't think you study them and listen to them with that kind of ferocity as you might have done back
No.
then.
Playing them over and over and over again. That's very true. Well, let's talk a little bit mixtapes, because it was a time of mixtapes. I was working in a kitchen in the early 90s, and on a Friday night I would make a mixtape for the Saturday in the kitchen. So I'm kind of imposing my musical tastes. You used to take them very seriously, and as you say, different ones for different things.
Yeah, different ones for different things, and even just like the art you kind of decorated on them as well, especially if you were giving them to someone, you could, you know, the way you wrote the song names on them and you draw little doodles and things on them. So it was more than just it was more than just kind of the music. It was kind of an intimacy as well, giving someone a mixtape, I think, as well. It meant you'd actually taken the time to really craft it and think about what was going on in it. And it wasn't a simple thing, you know, you had to record each song individually. And yeah.
It took time to do it. Absolutely right. I mean, I now make playlists for musical playlists for Scots Way, and because you've got Spotify, pros and cons. One of the pros is you can do something really quickly, but there's
Yeah.
not the same thought that would go into. I remembered slightly a bit of shame, a tape I made after a particular breakup, and it was so sad. You know, the songs were just so sad. It wasn't going to make me feel better, I don't think. Maybe it did in a way, but yeah, and as you say, you made them for all these kind of different reasons, and really kind of pondered over, or, you know, how you would put them together. And the book itself kind of works like a mixtape, doesn't it? You've got music throughout. Alex is listening to music throughout as well. How did you go about integrating that? Was that a difficult choice in itself to get the music in, the right music?
Yeah, it was quite well, it was difficult just because I had to leave out loads of songs as well that I maybe would have put in, so I had to be quite selective in the end. As I was kind of writing it, I just it was a bit like Trackman. It kind of happened kind of organically in that the music that I heard or was listening to at the time, if something came up that I thought, oh, that would be really good, and I would just note it down, or I kind of started making a Spotify playlist as I was going as well, so I wouldn't forget any songs. And if anything came on the radio that I thought would be good, I added that to it, and it just all kind of ended up kind of fitting organically. But I also thought about the songs that I used to like that meant things like that to me. So like that Valentine's card, like those sort of lyrics and the lyrics from Wonderwall, like I remember using those at one point. So I just was trying to think back to the songs that meant something to me at that point, and the moods that I felt when I listened to those songs as well. So it's all kind of music that I didn't put in really any songs that I didn't really know or didn't like that much. So it was all songs that kind of meant something to me as well. So I was, yeah, so that's how I did it.
And you say you put together a playlist. Can people hear the music of the book somewhere?
Yeah, it's on Spotify. It's so it's songs that kind of feature in it, but also songs that just kind of make me feel like the atmosphere of the book as well. So yeah, it's on Spotify. I think it's a public place. I think you can find it. It's called Fade Into You. So yeah.
I'll link to it when we post this up so people can do that, because I think that would be quite a nice way to read the book, to have its own soundtrack alongside it. We'll maybe talk more about the music later, but I want to really get into the characters, because that's kind of what I said to you before we started. Because Fade Into You is one of my favourite songs, you kind of had me immediately when I was going to read it. But it's the characters that stay with you. They're very, particularly the three central characters of Alex, Gavin, and Banny. How did they come about? How did you start writing your characters?
I know. Well, as I said, I just kind of thought about myself when I was that age, and just thinking about kind of my own friends, and I genuinely can't remember where the twins came from, to be honest. Why they ended up being twins. But like the character of, I suppose it's almost like an amalgamation. So when I was younger, I had a really good friend called Brian who he wasn't a school friend. I was a competitive swimmer, so I had all these friends from school and then friends from swimming, and it was kind of like my separate kind of wee worlds. And he was one of my swimming friends, and we were really, really close. And he he ended up going to fight in Iraq. He joined the Marines after school. So some of it was kind of just thinking back and on my own friendships, and so he actually helped me write some of the Iraq scenes as well. He I sent them to him just to kind of go over and try and help me with. And then Alex is kind of, it's not autobiographical at all. It's kind of loosely based on my kind of self at that age, but not really, because I wouldn't want people to think that that's me at all in any way. And that's my story, because it's definitely not anything to do with me. But yeah, they just kind of came from that. And then I think, I don't know, Banny, I really like Banny. He's one of my favorite characters in it. I feel like he's almost like a projection of my kind of perfect kind of guy at 16 or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
And they're very honest. What happens to them is very honest. And I think actually you being so close to the music maybe helps that, because it does move from the kind of wide-eyed optimism, if you like, of teenage years, despite everything and despite all that, ups and downs and trials and tribulations, to real life kind of kicking each of them pretty hard, in their own way. Was that something that you really wanted to show? You wanted this to be an honest depiction of that time rather than, rose tinted in any way?
Yeah, I wanted it to be realistic. I'm trying to think. Now that you've said that, there was I can't remember what it was. There was something I was talking to a friend about recently, and the couple got together at the end and they stayed together, and it really annoyed us. It was Dawson's Creek, in fact. That's what it was. So I started rewatching Dawson's Creek in lockdown, kind of partly for research, but partly just for a bit of escapism. And at the end, I don't know if you know Dawson's Creek, but Joey gets together with Pacey at the very end. She ends up with him, and we were talking about it. We were saying it was just so annoying because it's not like real life at all. They just kind of been put together, and it was just this kind of perfect ending for them all, and it just wasn't realistic, and we got really annoyed about it. So I didn't want it to be like that in the book. I wanted it to be like real life, because I mean, in real life, yeah, generally don't stay with your kind of first love. Your friendships kind of dwindle away, and then you start on this like different path, and so I wanted it to be realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, it made me think back to how, you know, you spend all these years of close relationships at school, and then you've got that one day when it all ends, and it seems to just kind of creep up on you, and suddenly people are going to university, people are starting work, some people nowadays, you know, go abroad or whatever, but there's just that kind of, all right, see you, as if sometimes you never see them ever again.
Yeah, it's strange that I tried to kind of evoke that a little bit in that last day of school scene in the book, where everybody's like, Alex kind of feels this kind of emotional connection to them, even though she maybe doesn't even like half of them and she's never spoken to them. But because it's that one day when they're all going to drift away, she kind of feels that emotional connection, and then they do kind of all just drift off into different lives, and yeah, possibly never see or speak to each other again. And again, that's where that kind of social media thing comes in as well. Like in those days, you didn't really have any way of keeping in touch with each other. You did
That's
just
right.
kind of drift away.
As you say, the bad aspects of social media and stuff, when you're actually in school, you can see them, but also nowadays people probably do stay together if they want to, or at least
Yeah.
keep in touch better. It's interesting you talking about Dawson's Creek, because it has that kind of teenage energy to it, and but they're not quite as kind of philosophical as I remember Dawson's Creek. There were huge sentences that go off everywhere, but it seems that these programs are kind of making a bit of a comeback, and I wondered if lockdown maybe had that to do, because One Tree Hill is on the telly now. I think the OC is on the telly now. It's interesting that maybe, you know, the people who were at that age are now, it's a bit of nostalgia telly.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think you just kind of go back to. I mean, I watched My So-Called Life as well in lockdown. I like that too, and I always go back to Buffy the Vampire Slayer because that's one of my favorite TV shows. But yeah, I think you're maybe right. I think I don't know, it's something maybe just about getting to this age and suddenly I don't know. It's strange. You just kind of do look back and think about things, and I don't know, sometimes it doesn't live up to what you remember either, does it? I suppose you look back and it's not as good as like the
Oh
TV
yeah.
shows. Yeah, yeah, and you're kind of like, oh, and then you look back at it with a different perspective as well. I think, like, you know, there's the Gilmore Girls as well. I never really watched that as a teenager, but I know a lot of people that did. And then I watched it when I was quite old, and I looked back and I connected more with the adult characters in it than the kind of the children, teenage characters in it. And it's funny looking at back from that different perspective. And then there was one point when I was watching My So-Called Life, and I was like, oh my God, I really feel sorry for Angela's mum in this. Like, Angela's treating her so badly. And at the time I was like, oh God, her mum's so annoying. And it's just that funny way, you just everything kind of changes perspective a little bit.
I think that is really interesting. But we were talking to someone about Alistair Gray's novel Poor Things, and how they read it in their early 20s, and now they reread it recently for Grey Day, as it was, and how it's a completely different perspectives on the book. And I think that can happen with almost anything. It can happen with music as well. I think, yeah, you know, something that you've got a real strong memory of, and you go back and you go, oh, I'm not sure why I was so tied to that. Just
Yeah,
a
no,
different
definitely, yeah.
and the characters in the novel really do change as well. There's a lot of discussion on mental health. Was that an important thing that you wanted to bring to the novel?
Yeah, I just wanted to explore that in a little bit more detail, and it was a lot of it was to do with the kind of the PTSD as well of going to Iraq and things like that. I was listening to a podcast on the Iraq War around about the same time as well, and that kind of connection kind of came into it too. And I read a lot of books on PTSD, but funnily enough, I couldn't really find any to do with like British soldiers. It was all American kind of soldiers, and yeah, so I wanted to bring that into it as well. And also I just I can't really stop thinking about Scott Hutchison either. Like, I was such a big fan of Frightened Rabbit, and he's just, I don't know, he's just always kind of in my head. Yeah, just the struggles that he went through, and just, yeah, it's just difficult. Some people just have it so much more difficult. So yeah, I wanted to kind of explore that.
And I think the idea of you know, getting someone to talk, getting someone is the wrong thing, but allowing someone to talk about what they're thinking and what they're having, and that does happen, even though relationships are changing and are stretched. There is still an attempt to understand and discuss what's happening to Gavin in particular.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. that's the one that yeah, Alex really tries to help, but again, she kind of feels helpless as well. She can't really connect to him, and he's not really ready himself, I think, until to open up until he is. It's up to him really to get to that point where he can open up, and then that's when he almost doesn't need Alex anymore, and he just needs himself to try and sort himself out. So yeah, I was looking at that as well, and just thinking about just my own experiences of people who I was at school with, and not everybody's made it to this point in time either, and it's like what happened to them, what stopped them from kind of making it this far as well, and so thinking about that too.
And let's go back to the music again, because it does. Well, let's talk about the title, because Fade Into You, and I was saying one of my favourite songs, was it always Fade Into You? Was that straight away you knew that was going to be the title, or was it a bit of a choice?
It wasn't at first. For a while I was gonna call it The Falls, and that was kind of the working title all the way through. It was The Falls, just because where the bed and breakfast and everything's kind of set as The Falls, um, which is actually based on my grandparents' bed and breakfast. Actually, they had a bed and breakfast in Connell, in front of the Falls of Laura. So it was always going to be The Falls, and then I was just thinking there's a Rebus book called The Falls, and I thought I probably shouldn't call it that. And then Fade Into You just seemed to fit, and I don't know. I liked having a music, like a song title for but much like Ian Rankin does. I quite like having a song title for the title of your book. So yeah.
And well, I've totally lost my train of thought. Give me a second, and I'm going to write down that I'm going to edit that out. This is what happens when you do these on a Sunday. Right. Where am I? Oh, that's why. It's because I've lost a page. That would help. Okay, here we go. For what a question to have forgotten. You're going to love it. There's also discussions on tablet and how two people's tablet are, never the same, and how some people become famous for their tablet in the locale, and it's so true.
Yeah.
Is that something that you've got a specific person and their tablet in mind there?
Yeah, my dad makes amazing tablet, and he uses his mum's recipe. And he says his tablet is like in no way, shape, or form as good as hers ever was. But I'm too young to remember what hers tastes like, so I just know my dad's, and it's amazing. I'm trying to get him to make some for the launch actually at Blackwell, so I'm hoping he'll make some.
Because we often speak to my brother, and the name Mrs. Miller comes up purely because of her tablet was legendary around Cambuslang, and Mum, if you're listening, perfectly good tablet, but there was something about this, something just that extra special. It was so funny to read that. But there's little things in the book like that just make the whole thing feel true and honest, little things that I think other people will. It's a very identifiable book, put it that way, I think.
That's good. That's what I hope. I mean, I always kind of write what I know. Like, some people write what they know and other people completely ignore that. But I've always kind of gone with that, write what you know, and then you build a story around it to give it that kind of truth and that kind of honesty. I feel like I can write better that way.
You have written about zombies.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I just was watching too much Walking Dead at the time, I think.
That's probably what it is. It's interesting as you read the book to think about the culture and the conventions of the time. You've got a same-sex couple, but they feel they can't come out. And I wondered if you had written it in the present day, would certain things be different, the way that you kind of looked at cultural conventions in particular?
Yeah, definitely would. Yeah, that probably wouldn't be in it as much, because I mean, I suppose it's not completely, like, nothing's great these days, but it's definitely much better than it was. So I think that storyline would have changed. And just like mobile phones and all these sorts of things, it was trying to remember when I first had a mobile phone, so I didn't put that in too early or too late. And just the bit at the park where you're trying to get a signal and you can't actually text somebody because it takes about 4 hours for the text to come through, back in those days when we first all started getting mobile phones and they couldn't cope with the volume. So those sorts of things.
People walking around with their phones in the air. The festival scenes are great as well, because it's a chance for people's different groups of friends to kind of meet up, and sometimes it works better than other times. But were you a big festival goer yourself?
Tea in the Park, really, just because I grew up in Kinross, and it came to Kinross in like, when was it, 97? So I was in 6th year at school, I think. So that was like a big massive thing. Like I think the entire school went. And then after that, it was almost like a magnet. If you went back every year, and you'd meet people from school that you hadn't seen for a while. You'd bump into them.
Yeah.
Everybody seemed to be kind of drawn back to Kinross for that one weekend. So I went there pretty much from 1997 up until I had my first child, which was 2014. So I went about 15 or 16
Wow.
years in a row. But I also went to like gig on the Green in Glasgow and like Belladrum and these sorts of things. So yeah, I have yeah. Not so much anymore, but although I am going to Belladrum this year just because my beloved Travis are playing. So
Okay. And of course, they're mentioned in the book.
Yeah, I have to give them a wee mention just because they.
And
Yeah,
it certainly struck me. Is there a character called Fran as well?
there is it? Yeah, the girl called Fran in it. Yeah.
I expect nothing else. So, do you know what's next for you? Or is it all about Fade Into You at the moment?
It's Fade Into You just now, I think. I'm trying. I've not really written anything since Fade Into You. Like it happened really easily. I don't know. It was the easiest book I've ever written. I don't know why it happened so easily. I just a mixture of circumstances. I think of the lockdown and being at home and having the time to write, and just the subject matter. I think just being in the right kind of place to write it. So I don't know. I feel it came so easily, and I feel a bit like, oh, how did that happen? It just was inside me waiting to come out, I think. And but I want to write a book about a 60s muse, like a sort of Patty Boyd type fictional character, just because I spend my days looking at pictures of her on Instagram and thinking how beautiful she is, and her and George Harrison, and I'd quite like to write something about that. And I've kind of tentatively started, but I'm not really very far into it. So that's what I hope to write next. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because one of the things that I did think about, because, you know, making tapes for other people, I was thinking, this is perhaps the ultimate tape that you make. Have you ever seen the documentary about Eric Clapton?
I don't know if I have actually.
Well, the whole of the Derek and the Dominoes album, you know, Layla and all the rest, he basically wrote for Patty Boyd, you know, thinking that he would win her over and all that. And it's the most heartbreaking thing I think I've ever seen. Been interviewed about it, and he gives her the album, and she basically listens to it, and she goes, "Oh, well, that's very nice, but that's, you know, thank you very much and no thanks." You can almost, it's like that Simpsons meme.
Oh yeah, the Simpsons.
Heartbreaking. Oh, and oh dear. Yeah, just that made me think, what would be the ultimate mixtape? Will it be a go away and put together this incredible band and write these incredible songs that people have gone on to get married to and all that kind of stuff, but the person that you've written it for, it's too much. It's way too much.
Well, it did work
are you having? So I should ask, are you having launches and things like that? So
yeah, well, the main launch is at Blackwell's in Edinburgh on the 21st of March. Tuesday the 21st of March. So that's that. That's the main launch at the moment. We don't really have anything else planned at the moment. So that's happening, in a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Well, Catriona, I just loved the book. It absolutely ticked so many boxes for me. It was great. It was great on a couple of levels. One, it's a great book to read, and it's interesting you say you found it quite effortless to read, because it's because it's kind of effortless to read in that sense as well. You know, everything goes through. It's not easy at times because there's some dark stuff, and rightly so. But yeah, and I hope it does really well for you, because I loved it.
I hope so. Yeah, thank you.
And it was great to catch up as well.
Yeah, good to see you.
And we'll be back soon with someone completely different.